It's funny how quickly things can change in Test rugby. If we'd have recorded this podcast 3 weeks ago, we might have been asking, is this the greatest Irish national team of all time? But instead, we are now asking how one of the most well-oiled machines in rugby union has suddenly seized up. And we're praising a French team that has finally got the gold medals to go with its golden generation. To help me try and understand it all, I am thrilled to be joined by former Springbok fly half and current coach of the Hino Red Dolphins in Japan, Andre Pretorius. And Andre, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're delighted to be with you. Looking forward to this one.
Yes, absolutely. Let's jump straight into it then. So today we're going to talk about what's gone wrong with Ireland. We're going to talk a bit about what's so special about France, and we'd love to get into your time in Japan as well. But we'll start off, I think, with talking about Ireland. So a lot of the audience of this podcast are Irish rugby fans, and a lot of the discourse currently happening in Irish rugby now is what's gone wrong? Why are Ireland not picking up the results that they perhaps expect to pick up? And I guess my question to you is, my first question, from an outsider looking in, what's changed? What's changed with this Ireland team that was pushing the Springboks for the world number one spots and now finds itself third best in the Six Nations?
I think we need to be realistic in when you look at this team. It's a team that's come a long way. They've played a similar style for a couple of seasons, and teams are latching onto that. And if they had played the France team that played Scotland on the weekend past, that that result might have looked different. France wasn't working as hard, getting around the corner, getting set. And the one thing that Ireland attack lives and breathes off is that go forward momentum, getting in behind defenders. Because they play a very narrow attack, they're trying to preserve space on the outside, which means that when they do pull the trigger on the edge, you need to have something to look at. You need to have either a mismatch of numbers or space enough, even if they've numbered up, but you've got people in space beating defenders and playing the offload. And I think teams have latched onto that, and France certainly did. Uh, the previous weekend they played against each other, the hits that France came out with, the way they controlled the gain line, it just put so much pressure, and it forced mistakes that you hardly ever see from the Irish attack.
Yeah, and do you see an Ireland that are trying to evolve? Because if we look at a year or so ago at the Irish game plan, we see a team that wants a lot of phases, wants to grind you down. If you compare a team like France is looking to slice you, whereas a team like Ireland is looking to crush you almost, if you like. And the kind of, if we think about the last game against Italy, the stats that jumped out to me was how slow their ruck speed was. When you're a team that's, as you said, is relying on grinding you down and being quick and overpowering you, to have that kind of slow ruck speed was a real surprise. But the big conversation currently in Irish rugby is all about the fly half position and how they've gone from Jack Crowley, with whom they won the Six Nations last year, to now Sam Prendergast, who is this young kid. And I'm going to bring up just a couple of images from social media just to give us something to look at. As an outsider and as a former international fly half yourself, how do you see this debate? How do you see why do you think they've gone for Prendergast, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of both players?
You mentioned evolving in at the start of this conversation, and that's part of why we are seeing what we are, because they're looking to find their feet and to find their wouldn't want to call it a new way of playing, maybe a mindset change in certain situations and scenarios. You've got the battle tested Crowley and the future General Prendergast. Now, the Irish have always been masters at getting the young blood in, coupled with the combination of older players around him, ensuring that he's looked after. And at the 10 position, unfortunately, the only way you you're going to get that experience is you have to play. You're going to have to make mistakes in big games. You're going to have to win games, and you're going to have to lose games to understand what what it takes to play at that level in that jersey, and especially in the Irish 10 jersey, because he runs everything. Now, I say that because it's changed in certain teams. If you look at the French team, when Dupont's playing, he's like the extra 10 now, or maybe he's the first 10, and Intermac's a secondary role. The Where the ball is at the ruck, he decides if it goes out, if it goes short, if it's a bridge ball, he'll kick from there. And with Prendergast or the 10 jersey for Ireland, it's a case of which side do we play? Do we keep bashing the door down, or have they opened up the space on the outside, staying connected to that pod in front of you, etc., etc. So I think they were willing to take that chance with Prendergast because they need him to be the man for the future.
Do you think he has a higher ceiling than Crowley? That's what a lot of people say.
I think he's definitely, from what I've seen, he's the more creative of the two. Physicality is definitely not his strength yet. That you can work on. And I think if I look at the way he tackles in the midfield on the off lineouts, there's some technique issues. And I was exactly the same. I was a terrible defender for a very long time, and the technique is what gets you out of sticky situations in defense. And I learned that way too late in my career, which would have had a big difference prior to that. So I think if they sort that out, and his physicality can definitely take up, but the variation that he's got on his kicking game, he's got a good distribution game. He's a lot more attacking mindset orientated. I think he's definitely got what it takes to take this Irish team. The other problem is the personnel around him. The
That's
Irish
what
side
my next
looks,
question was going to be was, does he have the players around him for that does that suit Ireland, that kind of attacking mindset?
yeah, maybe you're trying to play a certain type of game with the wrong tools, with the wrong equipment. Their game is pretty similar. If you look at the Munster and Leinster game, you'll see a lot of similarities with the way they play. They try and narrow defenses, preserve that space on the outside, get those 1-2 quick balls close to the line, and before you see it, players are in space on the edge. And Prendergast, and he trusts his passing game. He trusts the engage and release game that he's got. So he's definitely one that you can use there. But if you look at the age factor in the Irish side, if you look at the pure pace factor, you're preserving space on the edge. But is there really someone like a Bielle-Biarrey that can round two or three players in that space? I'm not sure about that.
That's exactly another thing I was going to ask was you talk about exactly preserving the space on the edge, but do they have the pace to exploit that? And I think particularly in the first game against England, there were moments where I was like, what they could really do with a speedster in this team. Bielle-Biarrey is the perfect example of someone that they've perhaps not got. When you going back to your comments about their defense and things and the technique, I'd really love to get some real nerdiness in this because you're the defense coach with the Dolphins, right?
Yeah, believe it or not, I am.
So, when you talk about the technique in defense, are you talking about getting lower? Because I've noticed when I speak to particularly rugby analysts and things, everyone makes a differentiation between like a kind of front on tackle or a cover tackle, or maybe in every scenario being bent 90 degrees at the hips and hitting low isn't the best thing. So when you're defending in that 10 channel, and we talk about maybe a defensive fly half like Andre Pollard, do you need to be more upright? Do you need to be more physical in that channel in modern rugby?
Without a doubt. And you'll see a lot of teams defend the tens at the back now. Firstly, it's your general. It's kind of like your quarterback. You don't want him taking too much contact. But a lot of tens, and hats off to Prendergast. He's brave in there. It's not that he's not brave. I've just seen him get into bad positioning when he's in that fight zone, in the engagement zone. So the one thing I would say is that you can kind of work around that with his positioning within the line. If it's a team that's playing into the vacuum a bit more, put him on the outside of the loose forwards. Make him defend midfield. If it's a team that plays off 10 off lineouts because they're trying to create two-sided attack, then just be the first man off the lineout. If they're playing to the vacuum, he's got a loose forward and a hooker or whoever's at the back of the lineout helping him with that defense. And then if we come to the technique, you've got to give yourself an opportunity to withstand the first contact engagement. And the only way you do that is you have to have some form of pillar behind you. So we call that the power position, where you've got same foot, same shoulder, and you get into that close zone, get close. And I mean, everybody says get close, get as close to the player as possible. But the big thing is you start you start the tackle with your shoulders, but you end it with your legs. And if you haven't got any pillars behind you, you're going to get pushed over. But the other problem with him as well is it looks like his dip is way too early sometimes, and then sometimes way too late. So I think with him, you want to dip as late as possible because you're probably going to be tackling 12, 13, 6 or 8 in that channel. You want to give them a chest target, and at the last minute, you want to change that target, and then they need to adapt. And that's how you control that situation. But what's happening at the moment is he's dipping way too early, so they just tuck their shoulder and they've got a perfect uh, target to hit in a really terrible position to make the tackle. And with that, you've got no punch in the tackle, which ultimately ends in you soaking the tackle or them just running over you.
Ah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for explaining that. So could you give us an example of maybe a fly half who you look at and you think, oh, he's a great defender. Because when I spoke to Angus Usher in a previous episode, we talked about how maybe hiding players in defense in like as rugby continues to evolve, that's going to become less and less possible. So who's a player who you think that's what I would think of as a modern defensive fly half?
Just because I watched them more, I think Sasha Feinberg Ngombazulu is a five that's got everything for me. And the way that's why they can play him at 12 as well, and they do at the Stormers. He closes the space. He's got good technique going into the tackle itself. There's a punch effect that he gets, which it's kind of insurance for their engagement, and he's very effective in that zone. He's got the size, which helps. But if you look at the way Intermac also defends in that channel, he's no slouch. He gets off the line, he makes his tackle. Crowley is a good defender in in that zone. So there's a lot of tens that make good tackles in that, but go and have a look at their technique. It's sound.
Yeah. So if you were selecting a team, would you if you imagine you're in a selection meeting and you're discussing who's going to play 10, would you ever say like he's got this fly half has got to be in the team because of his defense or he can't be in the team because his defense is that bad? Because I think a few people would say, and I've heard Shaun Edwards say that you don't necessarily want your fly half defending all the time. You want him doing the other stuff. So when you're doing that trade-off, is that something that the Ireland coaches are accepting of? Yeah, his defense isn't that good, but the things that he does bring outweigh the negatives.
That's it for sure. You know, you can still defend him at the back with a 15 where he's probably better suited. Catches high balls, needs to kick from the back. It's more suited to what he's supposed to do instead of having guys in the middle running at him. And they put it, on four mans, they've got tight head props running at you now. So it's a lot safer out there at the back. And also, it's more focused on what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So last point on islands then, if they ring you up, the phone goes tomorrow and they say, Andre, we're struggling here. We need to buck our ideas up. All of our coaches are going on the Lions tour. Would you come in the summer for us and give us some ideas? What would the thing that you would say in the Island Club now just say, we need to focus on this one thing in order to change around our fortunes here?
Wow, yeah, that's a good one because you don't want to change too much on that system. I think if let's say we will talk about the attack because the defense is a there's some problems there as well where they used to be quite sound with their defense. Their tackle completion has gone under 80% for the season, and you know it's uh, it's evident in certain cases. But I think let's stick to the attack then in this conversation. With the way that they play, they create a lot of opportunities. What I would like to see is it's kind of like, and maybe this is a segue into your France segment, but when they do punch and dent defenses, don't preserve your lines on the outside, waiting for that next structural attack to get into the edges. Flood that channel, keep the ball alive, keep the defense as unstructured as possible for a long time. Because Ireland is probably the best structured attack in the world. The way they get their pods going, the way they overload one side, they create two-sided attack, play off 10, play off 9, and it's well structured. So they've got that part. If you can put that unstructured mindset into them, once we do get a line break or we do dent the line, we get in behind them, go away from that structured feeling, keep the ball alive, make them chase, avoid rucks at all costs. And once you do get back into that ruck, then you use your system and your structure to create that unstructured system and attack again. And I think if they can start doing that, you're going to be less reliant on having to go gain line, gain line, gain line, edge attack. We have to do something because otherwise we have to go gain line, gain line, gain line again. So it's probably going to give you more opportunities. And I think that's what they're looking for. They want to go into that direction. And it's just taking a bit of time. But that would be my advice.
Absolutely love that. Thank you so much. So, as you said, we'll use that as a segue into France. But before we do, I just want to remind people, if you're enjoying the conversation so far, please considering subscribing to the YouTube channel and dropping the video a like. That really helps the channel to grow and keeps us having really great conversations like this one. Okay, Andre, let's move on to France now and use that as a great way to segue when we talk about structured versus unstructured. So, the kind of thing that I'm looking to do here is demystify France. So I'm going to just bring up some images just to give people something to look at, and people who are scrolling through can see that we've started talking about France now. The the feeling around France is always that it's magic, that they've got this jouet, that the players are capable of magic things. So when you watch France, are you seeing a team that is operating at the highest level, almost making things up on the fly, or is it a lot more structured than people give it credit for?
It is a lot more structured than people give it credit for, and then it's also the first part of what you just mentioned. They do make things up on the fly, but then they're in that mode then. This clip that you just showed, that's exactly it. There was nothing on. They kept playing and they were looking. Ramos played to the inside. Fiku gets an off break, makes the offload, and then Scotland were in trouble. And that's what I was trying to say about Ireland. They need this in their game to to be a bit more unpredictable, to be difficult to defend against once they do get you under the pump, because they get teams under the pump a lot of times, but they don't take advantage of it as many times as they can. Where France, because they've got that mindset, once they get into that unstructured stuff, that's when they light up. That's when they'll put everybody in there. You can have a look at the top view or the back view. It's like they've got no rules. And then once they lose the ball, you kick it back, they set their ruck up, and all of a sudden you see this beautiful structure out of nowhere. Five-man pod. Now, the debate between playing off 10 and playing off 9, it's one that'll rage on for centuries, and so it should. But the beauty of that five-man pod is because you're playing off 9, but you've still got an extra set of hands to defend. They'll play the second guy. If he runs it up, the two on the edge breaks away and it becomes a 3-2 formation. Or they'll play the second guy. He'll throw a skip to the fourth and it becomes a 2-3 formation. And but it still brings you an extra set of hands to defend, and you need to narrow up on that. And once they get something of that and they've got some really pretty plays, wrap balls around. Sometimes they pull the trigger a bit too quickly. They're rovers. The guys coming from the other side is just a bit late. They need one more phase, or they need one more pick and go just to give them an opportunity to get on that side. But so structured. But once they break the line, once they get that one offload becomes two offloads, becomes three offloads. That's when they get teams in trouble, and then they play on top of them. They keep them on the ropes.
Yeah, offloads is the key one for France that stands out. If I just try and check the stats here, the total offloads that they threw this Six Nations was 63. Actually, Scotland managed 63 in the end as well, which is interesting. And then no one else has more than 30. So that's just my own count there, which really tells the story of what France are able to do. And we see that with Toulouse and Bordeaux as well. Talking about that playing, actually, no, before I come to the 9 versus 10 debate, as a coach, how do you coach a team to be unstructured? How do you do a training session where you say, okay, today we're practicing being unstructured? Is it games of touch? Is it scenarios? How do you teach 15 players to all be on the same page in a completely unstructured scenario?
You need to understand that if you know where to go, you'll be quicker, you'll be faster, you'll get there. You, it just gives you direction. But teams need to understand the importance of a shape and a structure and why you need it. But then they need to see the advantages of if you don't have it, how unstructured play can put teams under pressure. And one of the things I find is that you games for sure is having, and again, skills. If you look at, I think the two props, Gro and Antonio, amazing skills. The way that they put balls out the back. I think Gro actually played a double pump, then he put it out the back, which was impressive. And if you look at
Yeah.
what the defense does in front of them, they just they just hesitate for a moment, and it puts the next guy into space. But that is something that you need to kind of, it's not teaching unless it's a skill. It's allowing them. Once there's a line break in training, are you teaching your players, and now I'm talking club level, I'm not talking international level, but are you teaching your players to set for the next phase, or are you going, was I don't want to see any form of a formation. I want you to get to the ball player. Once we get a ruck there, then we can get, uh, then it's normally that, and the good attacking teams, they find that structure from chaos much quicker than any other team. But they first go to the opportunity. And once that breaks down, then they get their structure.
And is that something that the French are the best at the moment? I guess to ask the question in a exciting way, do France have the most razzle-dazzle players at the moment?
I think they do. I think they do. I think there's we obviously the Six Nations is at the top of our list in terms of memory, and um, they've scored some great tries in the Six Nations, good victories. So, but the way they scored them, there's the variety of attacking plays that they've got and attacking threats, and the situations that they create is different to what you see. Scotland's got the same. They've also got a running ambition and attacking mindset that they want to do, but they're also a bit more structured than the French with the offload game. But I think so. I think the French they've got a good balance. Put it that way. They've got a really good balance of the two.
Would you like to play fly half in this France team? Or because of how it's so off nine, are you thinking, I'm not going to touch the ball in this team. It's going to be all about everybody else.
Geez, I would love to play 10 in this team. I think because it's so much off nine, your eyes can go a lot wider than just looking at the ruck, looking at what's in front, and maybe seeing a bit of kick space behind. You can watch the corners. If the corners get wide, whenever that nine hears your voice, he knows you've seen something, which makes your communication process a lot easier. And you just leave it to the little wizard to play his game. And once he decides, but you've got to stay on. That's the other thing. I saw that with Dupont is the 10, even though he's not calling it, if he decides to pass it out the back, you need to be alive and an option. So, but also that makes it difficult to defend that type of team because everybody's a live option.
Yeah, certainly what me watching Toulouse in the top 14, when they've got Dupont in there, everyone seems more alive. Everyone seems more on their toes. Everyone seems more apprehensive about what's coming next and making sure to get into that space to find him. But it's a phrase
You,
that I
sorry,
heard. Oh, sorry, go on.
just another point on the attack and what makes you said 63 offloads for Scotland and France.
Yes.
Now, the thing with that is we talk about the unstructured play and keeping it unstructured, not setting. The other thing is coaching offloads is offloads, being an offload team is kind of like being pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not.
Yeah.
And what
I've
happens
actually
is,
heard more than one rugby coach use that phrase, actually.
and the problem is that all coaches, attack coaches, want to go into the season saying we're going to be an offload team, and they practice offloads, and it looks amazing in the controlled environment at training. And then in the first game, after the first two that go to ground, they go, no more 50-50, stop the offloads. You need to give the players license to say, we are going to drop a couple, but geez, we're gonna make a couple and we're gonna get them under pressure. So let's just stick with it. Go and have a look at why you're missing the offloads. Is it a case of not beating your defender and trying to offload before that, or is it a case of the guys either side of him just not switching on and running the support lines where they're supposed to? So that's an important part of keeping that unstructured going.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy. So coming back to kind of the 9-10 debate, a phrase that I heard you use on the Like a Rugby pod with Mvea was you talked about the back door. He was asking you a question about the blue balls and a kind of excuse that they could have that some you were starting to come out of the balls about the pressure of playing in Pretoria at Loftus, and you must not lose there. And you said you shut that down. You're like, no, that's a back door, and if you let them have that back door, some players are going to take it. Dupont getting his ACL done in the first half against Ireland could have been that back door for France, and it wasn't. What what did you notice, if any, differences there were between France with Dupont and without? Was it a simple case of same but less good, or was it, did you notice like a flick switch and where Dupont would have been shining, now someone else was shining?
I think it would be unfair to say that it wasn't as good because I think it was a masterclass for someone coming off the bench in DuPont's place, where everybody's expecting this team to probably go to pieces now, to put on a show the way he did. And if you go and have a look at what he did off the ball, uh, his service was superb. His support play was superb. I just think he's just a good scrum off.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I'm a massive Bordeaux fan. I watched them in the top 14, and it
Tough
kind
place to play. It's a tough place to play.
have you played for Toulon for a bit, didn't you? So did you have a bad
Yes.
experience in Bordeaux?
And for Carcassonne as well, but we didn't get
Oh
to play
yeah.
Bordeaux. But the people are right on the field. It feels like they're part of the defense and the attack when you're when you're on the field. Tough place to play. But um, Maxime, is it Luku? Is that how
Yeah,
you
that's
pronounce
right. Yep, yep.
it? He's superb nine. Superb.
Did you enjoy it? You've kind of like given me an excuse to talk about top 14 here, which is one of my favorite things. How was that experience? Did you love it? Was it kind of, because you kind of think of it as like the English Premier League of rugby is the French league. Now, I know that Japan gets some incredible crowds, but club rugby in France, as a player, that must be on every player's bucket list to say, I want to go and do that for at least a season.
I did it too late. I just did it too late. I should have done it a lot earlier. I think it it gave me an experience that I could have used in my career going forward. It was probably just a bit too late. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. The people, the country, the rugby. And also there are challenges, which there will everywhere you will have challenges, but what an experience.
Yeah, right. This wasn't in my list of questions to ask you, but it occurred to me while we were talking. And now I can't not ask you it. So, as a goal kicker, and obviously you had a very famous goal kicking routine. When you see Thomas Ramos and people talk about him being the best goal kicker in the world, I, I, I never hear anybody talking about goal kicking technique. So, out of the goal kickers in the Six Nations, do you think Ramos is the best? And whose goal kicking technique do you think that's interesting, or that's awesome. I would have loved to have kicked a ball like that.
He's got the simplest kicking technique, and purely ball flight wise, he his ball flight's penetrating, and have a look at where it goes over the post. Most of the time, it dissects the post right in the middle. He is so consistent with his ball strike. He's so consistent with his whole process, and it shows. And I didn't see the goal kicking stats and where he is. I think Prendergast has got a really good technique as well, and so is Finn Smith.
Yeah, I'm just going to have a look now in terms of conversions kicked. So successful conversions, the 22 from France, and they scored 30 tries. So they missed eight, but I don't think Ramos took all of them. But yeah, when you talk about by dissecting the posts perfectly, that's something I remember from watching Lee Halfpenny as a Wales fan as well, is
Yeah.
that would just go over. Like you were going to need some narrower posts here because this is
And
too
you see
easy.
that slow rotation of the ball, which means he's just hit it on that little sweet spot, putting it through there. And the way he goes to the ball, it's so controlled, and it's lovely to watch.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I could ask you about goal kicking all day, but we need to move on, unfortunately. So, yeah, before we move on to the next segment, actually, no, we're not going to move on yet. There's one more France question I meant to ask you, which I forgot, but I've remembered now. Shaun Edwards' defense. So, in a world where we've got a Jacques New neighbor and we talk about the shooters and the covers and the sprinters and things being a very intricate defense, Shaun Edwards' defenses are thought of as a lot more simplistic. Kind of you stand in a line and you tackle the people who run at you, is how I kind of have described it to people as being a Wales fan. Am I doing it a disservice there? And Shaun Edwards as a defence coach, when I've heard players talking about him, they talk about him getting them to want to defend. And yourself as a defence coach, is that kind of what you take from watching Shaun Edwards as a defence coach, or is there a lot more intricacy than you think it gets the credit for?
Don't underestimate what you see on the field with that defense system. I think when you're coaching defense, you want to make something of everything. You want to make something of getting off the ground. You want to make something of the speed with which you fold, the speed of which tacklers get up and reload on the blind side, the speed with which your 12 and 13 splits when they get onto the edge, so they have numbers, good speed on both sides of. And if you know that Irish match, it took away the Irish penetration within their attack just by the way that they control that gain line. You know, they let's call it their chop and top technique is absolutely phenomenal. You know, the first guy does damage, second guy comes in over the ball, takes away the offload opportunity, slows the ball down. Good fold. Everybody's square off the line. The spacing's good. You know, they when they fold, they don't get caught narrow. Get off the line. Another one, controlling the gain line. I showed Envia the other day I drew a green line behind them. And the way that Ireland just couldn't get close to that line, they were just kept off the line, and they make good decisions breakdown wise. You know, they got 15 on feet for a lot of time, and when they do have a go, they're very effective at either stealing it or slowing it down. So it's a hard work, effort, and attitude type of defense, which Shaun is renowned for. But there's a lot that goes into that. And like I said, I think if you look at Scotland's first try, with it's that inside step, inside ball, and they scored from that. That wouldn't have happened against Ireland. The way they worked around the corner, the insurance on the opposite side came across just a bit late on that one. I think Shaun would have been filthy to concede in that way, where it was something that could have been prevented, but someone switched off. So it's a and the connection with which they defend gives them those double shoulder opportunities. Sometimes when they've got opportunities, they get off the line hard, and when they need to stay connected and just angle them out into the 15s, they do that as well. So it's a great defense to follow if you're looking to get into defense coaching.
is defense all about desire? Is it all about, as you as a defense coach, is it all about making the players want to defend?
It's a big part of it, you. It's a really big part of it. I'm always of the opinion that you want to build your defense from the inside out. So if you create the desire and that's your responsibility. That you've got to make them want to tackle and defend, but they need to know how. Because you see players, and again, I'm not talking international level, and sometimes maybe at international level too, but you see players missing tackles. One, sometimes they don't know who to tackle. The system is not giving them the tools, the communication's not good, the setting's not good, maybe the ball's too quick, so there's no jackal, no defensive pressure on the rucks. So sometimes you don't know who to tackle, and sometimes the player doesn't know how to tackle. He's just getting his body in front. He gets bulldozed. Hopefully they trip over him. So if you've got that desire and you've got a great tackle technique, and then you've got an effort to implement the system of your choosing, that's a recipe for a successful defense.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for explaining that. So, before we go into the final part of the show, I just want to remind people that if you do want to support the channel a little bit more, you can get membership for just 99 pence a month, which is the lowest that YouTube lets you set it at. And if you do fancy helping out the channel in that way, it just makes it so much easier to spend more time making more and more content. We had a chat there about the top 14. If you like the top 14, you want to learn more about it, I do a weekly top 14 podcast, which you can find on Spotify or Apple. If you search top 14 digest, then it will come up. It's me and my co-host from the Atlantic Coast, Madame Mazmak, getting all of the latest news and the latest gossip from all things French rugby. Okay, Andre, into the final part of the show, I want to talk about your time in Japan. So you've headed over there now. You are the defense coach for Red Dolphins. Is it Hino, is how you call it?
Yeah, he know Red Dolphins.
Hino Red Dolphins. What was your, I guess, expectations heading over to Japan, and how is that matched up to the reality?
It's been a great couple of years I've been here. The expectation was for me to grow as a coach. I think I spent enough time with the teams that I coached. I had a great time with the Northwest University where I started my professional career. Got an opportunity to coach the Leopards and the Varsity Cup together. And at some point you need to look to to go to the next step. And this got put across the table, and I took it immediately. And it's been everything I expected and a bit more. It's been tough. It's, being a a coach that prioritizes, excuse me, prioritizes player relationships above anything else, finding connection points with players that doesn't speak the same language. You need to start being really creative. It's sometimes it's just a tap on the shoulder, or a joke that you rehearsed for 2 days that you put onto the field. You knew exactly when you were going to say it, and then it becomes something. But you need to find little ways like that to connect with players, and because that just makes your tough conversations easier when you do have them with those players. If you're trying to correct players in a certain way and you have built no relationship, that that conversation gets a bit tough. And it is tough in Japan, because with the culture, yeah, it's also, they take error correction differently. Uh,
Yeah.
you don't do it in front of a group. You have your one-on-one sessions, and you kind of, and it's all about it assisting anyway, but you have to emphasize that point. Listen, what you're about to see, you're probably going to be embarrassed about this, and it's way below the standard that I know you're capable of, but we're going to find a way out of this, and we're going to ensure that this doesn't happen again, or it happens less often. So the the connection part, that's been quite tough. Also, I now realize how much I tended to overcoach and overspeak when I was in South Africa. So you've got to get your messages nice and clear. Your presentations have got to be short, sweet and short. And so that's helped me grow in that regard.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that whole point that you brought up there, that's not something that I was anticipating you saying about the communication and in the cultural sensitivity of speaking to someone from Japan about giving them feedback. You have to be careful. And I remember when I was in university, and in the UK, we have people from all over the world come to our universities, and I've heard lecturers talk about that of they've given a student 80%, and the British student is like, fantastic, that's awesome. And the Japanese student is crying and saying, how am I supposed to tell my parent that I only got 80%?
Yeah,
And the British lecturer is trying to explain to them,
yeah,
no, that's as good as you're going to get. No one gets 100%.
yeah.
We don't give that. So I work in a company that's got a lot of it's an Indian owned company. And that's something that I have to be cognizant of as well, is how they respect authority. Like in the UK, I can walk across the office to the most senior person in the office and have a chat with them. In India, there's the hierarchy is a bit more rigid there, so that's something that
Yeah.
I've had to develop as well in my working life of having to be aware of how I work with how they're comfortable working in their working culture because it's not the same. And it's awesome to have that awareness.
100%. And with and they do appreciate that. And one of the big challenges here is that just trying to get them to make more mistakes. It's once there's one mistake, it's like the shop closes. The rest of training doesn't matter. It's you have to, and they're getting better at that because they can see what the consequences are and how we deal with it. So it's taken a while for us to get there, but that was one of the biggest challenges. You're allowed to make mistakes, but let's try and make new ones because that means the older ones have been looked after, and we get an opportunity to make new mistakes.
Yeah, that reminds me so much of a story of in the automotive industry of I'm sure it's been used in the aerospace industry as well of an American company working with a Japanese company, and the American company gives the Japanese manufacturer the specification that says no more than two defective parts in 1,000. And the Japanese company sends the product back, and it's a perfectly functional product, and there's two spare pieces in the box. And they said, we didn't understand there's two defective pieces, so we sent you a product and we sent you two broken pieces as well. We assume that we assume that's what you
So
wanted.
good. That is
Yeah.
so good. That's typical them.
Yeah, so I don't know if that story is true, but it's a story that often gets told. But talking about uh, coaching rugby in Japan, I've often heard it referred to as a land of innovation. That new ideas coming into rugby. Whenever you hear the Springboks who play in Japan come back, you always hear stories of them bringing ideas back with them. I don't know if you saw the chat between Razzie and Felix Jones that was on YouTube this week. They put up a clip of them having a chat and they talk about all these players coming back to South Africa with all these ideas from around the world and just having to come up with new solutions because of the challenges that Japanese players have. Is that fair? Is it the land of innovation in rugby?
I think so. And I think if they manage the influx of foreign players well, you know, you can get the same advantage that India got from the IPL, where they had a certain amount of foreign coaches, certain amount of foreign players, certain amount of young players have to be part of that. And you're working with such a diverse group of players. You've got your professional foreigners, you've got your company players, and you need to you need to find a way to get them all onto the same level first, and then look into, depending on which division you are, looking to either stay in that division by just purely playing to your strengths, the old David and Goliath, know what you've got in your hand, use that to your advantage, know what their weaknesses are, or you're sitting with a superstar team with so many, and then you've got other challenges. You've got team dynamic challenges where you've got foreigners not getting game time, company players that are good enough, probably better than some of the pros, not getting game time because they're not on contract, and how to manage that. And that's something that nobody talks about, but that can make or break a season, is the way that your non-players are adding value to your team, and do they really feel part of it? Do they feel that inclusion?
Yeah, I can imagine that's such a huge challenge. It must be so easy for some players, especially if you're only there on something like a 1 year contract, which a lot of players in Japan are. And let's be honest, there's a perception that it's a place that you can go that's less physical where you can make a lot of money. You must have to be really careful about which foreign players that you bring in.
They have to fit your firstly your team character, and they have to fit your game model to a T. Otherwise, it's no use bringing them. And also, not everybody is travelers. Not everybody travels well. Not everybody is suited for playing. So once they do get there, what's good is that a lot of these teams make a big effort in ensuring that the foreign players are looked after, not left alone, standing in front of the inland services or whatever you call it, and not having a translator with them or putting into awkward situations, which you do get into. You will get into awkward situations, and but that's the other thing with Japanese people. They never make you feel like you don't belong here. It's always a case of, and if you treat them with respect, they'll treat you even better.
Yes, absolutely. So more on the playing side then, a question that I want to get learning from it that I can apply to my teams that I support in Wales and within Wales is the conversation around coaching teams that don't necessarily have big players. So in Japan, we know that the players tend to be smaller than I'm sure what you're used to in South Africa, particularly in the north of South Africa as well. So uh, how do you win rugby matches with small players? Is it possible?
Yeah, for sure. I think, if you look at if you look at Italy, and not that they're a small team, but they're a minnow, or they used to be. They're playing some really good rugby at the moment. I should probably not say that because what Casada's doing with that team and the way that I know they had a couple of injuries in this last game, but they definitely, well, they're not a minnow. I retract that. They're not a minnow, but they find ways to play to their strengths. And I think Japan showed that in the past with Jamie Joseph, Tony Brown, finding those strengths, looking to get them into certain more of the same pictures that make it difficult for defenses on attack. And then when you're getting onto defense, picking your fights, putting them into places where you want to defend from. Eddie Jones did that with them in 2015, I think. Um, you need to be smart with where you want teams to play. How much do you kick? Where do you kick? Do you kick out? Maybe you got one great line-out contester and you can put pressure on. Otherwise, set your defense system up so that the the contesting setup complements your system and not the other way around. With Hino at the moment, our defensive system, we focus on contesting first, and I'll make do with whatever's left for the defense system. But if you don't have good contesting, you know, kick the ball down the field, don't have a lot of lineouts, keep the ball in play, make 200 tackles and get pressure on as many rucks as possible. So it's definitely possible. You just need to know go in with a plan. Go in with a plan and adapt from there, but it's definitely possible.
That's a lot of self-analysis then, isn't it? That's a lot of understanding your strength, understanding your players. Because I think a lot when people talk about analysis, they talk about analyzing the opposition. But something that I also took from my chat with Angus was you need to understand yourself as a team to be able to make those decisions of exact the perfect example that you gave of do we kick the ball off and contest the line out, or do we not want line outs? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and it comes down to being really honest with what you've got. The ideal situation is I put down my game model and I say this is the way I want to play. And now I go and find the personnel to fill into those roles. That's ideal. But that doesn't always work like that. Now you've got these players. What's the best game model? We need to fit the game model around this team. And that's why we spoke about Ireland earlier. Maybe their game model just needs a bit of a tweak where they need to go 10 or 15% less of one and give it to another box, and maybe it changes the flow of the game for them. And with these types of teams like Japan, you've got to find the game model that suits your players.
Yeah, I love that so much. So we've reached the end of the list of questions that I've had to ask you, Andre. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I've learned a lot. I hope all of the listeners and viewers have learned a lot as well. If you have enjoyed what you've seen today, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, or if you've listened on audio formats, please consider dropping a 5-star review and sharing a link with a friend. It's really difficult to grow audio formats at the moment, so if you could support the show in any way, that's massively appreciated. So, Andre, thank you so much. I'd love to have you back on again one day. And I just hope that you have the best of luck for the rest of your season in Japan and have a good night's sleep because I know it's quite late over there.
You're welcome. Great show. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I hope everybody's team wins. Cheers.